Hey there, welcome back to Change Coach Conversations. This is number 11, and I want to talk about the idea of zooming in and zooming out. So this is something I talk about a lot when I work with coaches, train them. It's something that we're all kind of naturally doing. All helpers, I think, naturally do this, but it's a really cool thing to be aware of and to kind of have your eye on. So zooming in is just like it sounds. It's where you're in conversation with someone and you're kind of granular. So you're really kind of in the story and in their personal details and in the content of things. You're talking about their circumstances or their psychology, their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So it's when you're talking with someone and they're telling you, I had this conversation with my mother-in-law this morning and here's how it went. And, it's very concrete, personal, in the form. Now, zooming out or zoomed out is the opposite of that, right? It's a little more high level. It's not so personal. It's not about the form so much, but it's maybe a higher level conversation about what we all have in common, or the fact that you're thinking, or how our experience comes to life, right? That we are this consciousness within which experience comes and goes. It's not about you. It's much, much bigger. So all coaching conversations, I think, have this mix of zoomed in and zoomed out, ideally. And there's no perfect science behind this. I'm not saying we need to get the mix right, and we definitely need both. Again, it isn't that one is better than the other or anything like that. But it's a very helpful thing to kind of have in the back of your mind, as there's sort of this flow from zooming in and then zooming out. I find this to be super effective. So you have to be zoomed in to some extent, because that's the world most people live in. I think it's the world we all live in a lot of the time, where it does look like I'm this person and I have this experience come into life and I live in this physical world, and these are things I need to talk about. So sometimes people, coaches, practitioners, therapists are only zoomed in, right? Sometimes, like more traditional psychologists, for example, like we're all zoomed in. Everything's about psychology and the form and the content, and let's change it or better it or see it this way. So in my opinion, you can be a little too zoomed in. That keeps people analyzing things and in their heads and very kind of in the weeds, in the sticky weeds of their psychology, trying to figure out how to feel better from this very limited pool of stuff that's available to them. It's not a great place to hang out and be for too long. And especially if you're working with someone, you don't want to keep them there. And it just feels like, the feeling I'm getting, it just feels like you're drudging through like quicksand. It's complicated and messy. So you can be there a little bit too much. Now, you need to go there to some extent, because that's where you relate to someone as a human being, right? That's what's in their face. It's what's in their head. It's where they live, so we need to go there and we relate and we hear how their mother-in-law conversation was, but then you kind of zoom them out at some point. And so when you go from that sticky granular to more zoomed out, it's like, oh yeah, tell me about how that went for you. Yeah, I hear you. That was not a comfortable conversation. Well, let's look at it now from the bigger picture. When we take you and mother-in-law and feelings and shoulda went this way and all of that out of it, and now we're looking at what we all have in common. Now, from a zoomed out place, we're looking at how all experience takes shape. Where those feelings you're having right now are really coming from. They aren't coming from your mother-in-law, and they aren't about you or her. We're looking at it in a bigger way. So zoomed out is great, but just like people can be a little too zoomed in to where it's not so effective, we can also be too zoomed out. So I see this show up a lot with times when, people just want to have kind of a more philosophical conversation about consciousness and how life works. That's beautiful. But the threat there, the potential downfall there, is that it doesn't land with people because it can be very vague at times. It doesn't give them anything practical. It doesn't, too zoomed out, they have a hard time sometimes seeing how what you're sharing, it's maybe very true in this zoomed out way, how that applies to them. Like it isn't real and tangible sometimes until it is. So again, everyone's different. Every conversation's different. Every moment's different. But it's great to have your eye on that a little bit, to have a sense. And you'll know from the person you're sitting in front of. If you get too zoomed out and their eyes glaze over, or they went up in their head, or they feel defensive and say, what do you mean? I'm not, there's no self or whatever. That's when you zoom back in. That's when you come back to them and you work things out there a little bit, and then you take them back out when it feels right. And again, same way, vice versa. If they're so caught up, so zoomed in that they're saying, yeah, but what will I do? And what should I say? And how do I feel better? That's when you zoom them out and you help them see, oh, wow, this mess you're in, that's a bunch of messy thinking, but let's look at it from back here. So I hope that kind of makes some sense, where it's this constant, it's like a camera that has that autofocus, right? It's this constant process, really, where we're going in, we're relating to them as human beings in a very real, natural, practical way that is about their life and their content. And then we're showing them the bigger picture. And that's what's super helpful. Now that's where what they're going through becomes less personal and more grounded in these principles and what underlies all human experience, and how they aren't special. And that's a good thing. They aren't special in their problems. Oh yeah, this is what minds do, or this is what humans go through, or whatever. It gives them that bigger picture. And then when you're out there and they're seeing the bigger picture, you zoom it back in at times, right? That's how it becomes relevant and practical and lands with them in a way that they can see and feel and grasp. So see if you can just get a feel for this kind of zooming in to personal, zooming out, and how incredibly effective that could be. It covers all the bases. It's not this traditional thing of let's sludge through all the content and analyze the past and the circumstances, but it's acknowledging that, because to the extent that that's there for them, right? But then it pulls them out of it. And it's not this esoteric, maybe vague kind of philosophical understanding that doesn't feel real. It points there because there's a ton there, but it also is sure to kind of zoom them back in to help them see how these bigger concepts show up in their life, and maybe in particular in their day, and what's on their mind in that moment, how it ties into the big picture. I love this idea of zooming in and zooming out. I think it's just the most effective way to kind of work with people. And again, there's no perfect science to it. There's no formula to it. It's just more something that we kind of have on our radar, on our mind as coaches, and that we're kind of looking, your client's a little too zoomed in or a little out, and you're just kind of feeling your way through it to help them see the best of both worlds, really to help them get that bigger picture, but in a way that feels practical and helpful and relevant for them in their life. So hope this is helpful. If you want to learn more about zooming in, zooming out, check out the other videos. There's a whole page. I know I've been doing these on Facebook Live. Maybe some of you are listening to this on the page right now, but there's a whole Change Coach Conversations page. I'll share the link here where all of these conversations I've had so far live. And so I hope this one's a helpful addition, and I'll see you back here next week. Have a great week.